It's our last day here in Mexico. We all know how the Fire Ride Festival went. It didn't go to plan. But the last few uploads I created and have been shredding a Slopeduro bike, which is absolutely incredible. It's the first bike like this that I've ever had, and since making it, loads of you have been asking me questions about what I'm running, how it rides, what it's like. So in this video I'm going to give you guys a full detailed breakdown of my Slopeduro rig. Firstly, what is a Slopeduro bike and why would you need one? A Slopeduro bike is basically a condensed, small enduro bike that you can still ride trails on, but you can also do tricks like bar spins and tail whips. Obviously, a normal enduro bike, let's take mine for example, 27.5-inch wheels front and rear, quite knobbly tyres at the moment for the winter riding. We've got front brake and a rear brake, gear cable, dropper cable. All those things make it quite difficult for doing tricks, but make it incredible for pedaling and for riding downhill. Why would you want a Slopeduro bike? Well, it combines the two elements of freestyle and trail riding perfectly, which is super fun, making a really cool discipline. Also here, for example, the jumps are quite big, a bit too aggressive for a hardtail, but also would be a bit slow on a big squidgy bike. So creating the Slopeduro fits perfectly in the middle. Before we take a look at the bike, one of the most frequent questions that popped up was, you're sponsored by Hi-Bike, why are you riding a Lapierre? Well, Lapierre, Ghost and Hi-Bike are all sister companies. They're all owned by the XL Group. So part of our sponsorship, luckily, we get to ride all of these epic bikes from these epic brands. Let's start by taking a look at the skeleton of the bike, which is the frame. It's a Lapierre Zesty 5.9. It's actually a 2020 model. It's a size small, 120mm travel front and rear, and 29-inch wheels on the front and rear as standard. And if you just step back a moment, ignore the 29-inch wheels, all the gears and stuff, and just take a look at the frame and the chassis, it's actually perfect for the conversion that we've done. The frame's made of aluminium, so it's sturdy but also very lightweight. It's actually painted up front in like a nice gunmetal, which I think looks so good, and it looks really insane in this light. There's so much detail on here, like all the linkage is very, very tidy. You've got like a nice little mud deflector there, push-in bottom bracket, which is really good for fitting a crank stop, which we'll come onto a bit later. Push-in headset, and it's nice and tidy when you're running all the cables, because obviously, like all bikes these days, there's the internal cable routing. The geometry of this bike actually feels amazing. It's like my jump bike, just with a rear shock. The only thing is the back end is quite long where it takes the 29-inch wheel, but it is a Slopeduro and that's part of the compromise. But the long bike actually can weirdly help when you're riding down steeper trails, or like the stair sets we was at the start of this trip. Let's take a look at the suspension. So up front we've got a Fox Rhythm 34, 120mm travel. So on my dirt jump bike I'm running 100mm, so there's not a huge amount more there. And if you was to start hitting some real big hits, you'd probably start to notice that travel disappearing quite quickly. I'm actually running about 200 PSI in there. The forks are super stiff. They take a 29-inch wheel and they are super small and lightweight with the 34 chassis. On the enduro bikes now you're running sort of 36 or even 38s most of the time. Originally this bike come with a lockout on the handlebars, so for a Slopeduro not ideal because it's more levers and stuff in the way. So what I did to just stiffen them up is got the ball end of the cable in here, and then I just pulled it through and set them to where I want it, pumped them up. Rebound's pretty slow. They don't actually feel anything, like when you push them down, they're actually solid, they don't move, but that's really good because it makes this bike super reactive, which for the type of riding I've been doing is exactly what I'm after. The rear suspension's a similar story. We've got a Fox Float DPS in there. Again, I've got way over 250 PSI in there, but that is quite good because obviously with air it's super adjustable. So when we rode the stairs the other day, I just softened the whole bike up, and despite the fact that I forgot my front brake, the bike was able to adapt to ride the stairs. Whereas if you had a hardtail here, you would be fine on the jumps, but you wouldn't be able to go up and do the stairs. Maybe some of you are sitting there thinking, why the hell are you running it so stiff? Basically, when you're doing jumps and tricks, you want the bike to be as reactive as possible. So obviously when you think of a dirt jumper, they're just hardtails. When you start going the other way towards downhill bikes, you can do tricks on them, it's not a problem. But with all the squidge, it just becomes a bit more unpredictable and makes things a bit more difficult. Let's take a look at the first big change of this bike, and that is the wheels. So I said a moment ago that standard this bike comes 29. Well, to make this Slopeduro bike perfect, we're running a mullet. We've got 27.5-inch on the front wheel for the trails and the big bumps, and then on the rear I've actually put a 26-inch Halo Chaos in there. And the reason you do this is purely for reactivity. When you're spinning and twisting out of the ramps, by having the smaller wheel, it makes the bike shorter, more agile, more reactive, and better for tricks. The front wheel's a Halo Vortex. It's an enduro rim from Halo. It's exactly what I run on my enduro bike. It's nice and wide, so it makes a bigger triangle, which in turn makes the wheel stronger. And like I just said, 27.5-inch front wheel, it eats the bumps up, this thing. On the rear, we've got the Halo Chaos. It's what I run on the jump bike. It's a bomb-proof rim. It will literally survive anything you throw at it. It's running single speed, which we'll take a closer look at. The hub is a DJD with 120 points of engagement. So not only does it sound epic, but you will never catch this thing slipping. One of my favourite things about the Halos is the customisable graphics. I've gone for orange to match a theme on the bike, and I'm actually running inner tubes in here rather than tubeless. I just prefer it on the freestyle bikes. Tyre setup is not ideal. I've got a big knobbly Magic Mary on the front, and I've got a cheap tyre which I bought from the bike shop on the rear. So ideally I'd probably want something like a Racing Ralph front and rear, but I didn't have them at home. Moving up to the cockpit area of the bike, I'm running the Gusset S2 handlebars in a 20mm rise. I've got them cut down at 740mm, which is perfect. Gives enough clearance of bar spins, but it means you've also still got some control without feeling like you're running scooter handlebars. The stem is a Gusset S2, it's 33mm reach, so it's nice and short for those bar spins and making it nice and reactive, because ultimately that is the goal with this bike. And it's also a 35mm clamp, so nice and strong, no worries about your handlebars breaking. One of the most important components on the bike, because ultimately it's what connects your hands to the bike, the grips. We've got the Gusset Sleeper non-flanged grips. I'm rocking black on the right, pink on the left, and that was completely by mistake, but it actually looks sick. One more thing on the cockpit area, I've completely removed everything except the rear brake. I want this area to be as clean as possible. I don't want to be getting my hands caught when I'm doing bar spins. I don't need gears because we've single speeded it. Dropper's not necessary. You just don't need all that up here, and you need it clean like it is. Whilst you're on components, the saddle, it's the S2 Dirt Jump saddle. This is the pivotal option. We've done away with the dropper, but they actually make this now with rails, so if you want to run it on a railed seat post, you can. Why have I chose this seat over an enduro one? An enduro one's probably a bit lighter, but for doing bar spins and all those tricks, you need a nice fat saddle so you get a good clamp, and that's definitely provided by this bad boy. This is probably the next biggest change apart from the wheel size, and that is the fact that I've decided to run the bike single speed. Obviously, that is not great for pedaling uphill. Although my gearing's quite light, I'm running a 32/14, so the ratio feels good. It's good for acceleration. But I used the Gusset 66 conversion kit, and I didn't have a chain tensioner, so I nicked the small 7-speed SRAM EXO derailleur off my downhill bike, because it's a bit shorter, it's a bit less to get caught, and it just keeps that area nice and clean whilst providing the chain tension needed, especially with this full suspension, because when the bike's going up and down, you can't run a fixed chain tensioner. You have to have one with a spring in it, otherwise you'll end up snapping your chain and doing a load of damage. Why single speed? Much cleaner, saves a load of weight for doing tricks. I don't need a big 11, 12-speed cassette on the back. It's completely unnecessary, and it just looks so cool and completes the whole Slopeduro thing. And you can also do fakies without worrying about snapping your gears. I'm running a Gusset 11-speed chain actually, which is nice and thin, so it's a bit lighter, and I had to put this inner tube on here because it's a bit slappy and it was making a stupid noise. If I was to ride bigger jumps again, like the Fire Ride course where it was quite pedally, then I'd probably want a slightly stiffer gear. This one was a bit low at certain times with a 14 tooth on the rear, so what you could do is drop that to either a 12 or an 11 tooth cog, and it would just make it that little bit stiffer. I'm running SRAM T1 carbon fibre cranks, which does make a big difference with the carbon. It makes the middle of the bike a lot lighter, so when you're spinning it around, it just feels so much easier and much more pleasant. I'm running flat pedals, Gusset S2, loads of grip on those with the pins, but clips aren't necessary, especially when you're doing tricks jumping off the bike all over the place. These cranks are 175mm long, which is about 10mm longer than what I use on the jump bike, which is fine. There's plenty of clearance up front for bar spins, but when they're down like this, they are quite low. So that's why the suspension needs to be quite stiff, because otherwise, if you was to pedal over a rock, then you would probably pedal strike the ground. But riding the course the other day, you keep the pedals flat, there's so much clearance, and it's definitely not a problem. I mentioned at the start about a push fit bottom bracket being really good, and the reason for that is because I've got an inner tube on there as a crank stopper. So basically what it does is it creates resistance. So when you're doing tail whips or tricks where your feet are off the pedals, your pedals aren't spinning and you're not losing them under the bike and landing switch-footed or completely missing them. The reason a push fit bottom bracket is better for this is because with the cups on an external one, as you pedal, you're obviously creating resistance by putting the tube around there, and as you pedal forward, it actually undoes your bottom bracket and makes them so tight that eventually you can't pedal. Brake that I'm running is a SRAM guide. It's cheap and cheerful, but it does the job. It's a 180mm rotor, obviously rear brake only, 4 pistons, so there's plenty of power there. It's perfect for what I'm using the bike for. If you go downhilling, you definitely want to add a front brake. The only annoying thing is, I didn't put a longer brake on with a longer hose, so I can actually only do 2 bar spins each way, but it means you just have to think when you're going down a course about doing regular and opposites so that you don't get that hose all tangled and wrapped up, so it ends up stopping there. My final little touch is the muck off frame protector kit. This bike is actually Cara's, so when I return it, so I don't get in trouble, it has to go back in good condition. The muck off kit looks sick. We've got the Mexican skull on there, so I even themed it for this trip. Got a little bit down here just on the places where it all where you rub the bike and sometimes wear the paint out. So yeah, they do loads of different themes. I chose this one because it's fitting for where we are, but that's actually such a nice touch and I'm really stoked with how that looks. So there we have it. You've now had a detailed look at my Slopeduro. If there's anything that I've missed, for sure put it in the comments. I'd love to answer and get all that information out there to you. Some of you messaged me asking, is it worth doing? I would say 100% yes. If you like freestyle, doing tricks and riding trails, this is perfect. Obviously it costs a bit of money, but it's definitely worth it. However, just be aware that it does make your bike feel quite different. It's quite a change, but if you like tricks, it's a positive one. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you like this bike as much as I do. I absolutely love it. It's super fun. It is staying, so you'll be seeing more of it. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, leave some comments below, and I will see you guys in the next video.
Yeah. I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it, fuse like a magnet. Lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If the shit tastes sour, you should taste mine. I'ma stay in power for a long time. Get up, nah, I ain't a